First off, welcome to my show.
Well, thanks for having me. It's a true pleasure. 안녕하세요.
Perfect.
No, I've actually been to Korea quite often, and I really love Korea, and I think it's very underrated for travelers. I will first introduce myself. I'm Boris Kester from the Netherlands. I am one of approximately 250 people in the world. Travel to every country. I'm still traveling a lot. There's a lot of places I want to see. I mean, the world is so big and there's so many beautiful areas and beautiful people to meet. I also wrote a book about my travel. I'm currently writing a second book because the first book, not only did I love the writing, but also the people who read my book are so happy about it that they're really asking me, can you please write a second book, because we like your adventures and we like your stories. So, and you have many more things to say. So yeah, so that's a very short introduction.
I would like to start with you being Boris, programmer.
Yes.
What are the thoughts and thinking mechanism of programmer? And after you travel all these countries, what are your thoughts? So please explain to us.
Oi, that's an interesting question. So I just need to explain shortly that when I left high school, I was the only person in my class not to go to university, because I thought, like, look, I've been in school for 15 years. First, it's time to go into the real world and find a job and do something else than being in school or university and learn. I mean, learning is very important, but I think it's also important to have a link to society and to look further than your school building or university building. So I consciously chose to start a career in IT, and I was a computer programmer for 4 years, which was a great job. I really learned a lot, and it's still very useful because obviously, I mean, it's a good thing to know about more or less the background about computers usage. I still do some programming, but just for my own website and everything. But anyway, after 4 years, I realized that office life for me it's not going to make me happy. So I decided to do a drastic change in my life. I went traveling for a year. So I basically quit my job. I left my home. I put my stuff with friends, and then I was gone for a year, traveling in Europe and Africa, and also doing some part-time work in Africa, and then I decided to go to university. So eventually I ended up in university, and I got my degree, not in computer science, not in programming, but in political science. So completely different course. But so the programming, I think still, I mean, funnily enough, I was never good at mathematics at school. So I'm more a language person. I'm more like hi. But and normally they say that the logic you need to program computers, mostly people are like good in mathematics and they become programmers. But I'm not sure this is true, because for me mathematics is very abstract, and programming is not really abstract, because you're programming something concrete. I mean, you're programming something that you can see, you can use, and of course then, I mean, we're talking a long time ago. I'm an old guy, so this is pre-internet. I mostly program for my website, as I said, so it's more database and everything. And I'm still sometimes really shocked when I use a website to see how badly it can be designed. And then I look at it as a programmer, like, why can't you just make this a better site? I know how to do it, but so yeah, I think it's still helpful to have the background, but basically, my IT career, in a way, also helped me to realize that my office life was not going to make me happy. It's still very good. I did it. It gave me a lot of background and fundamental knowledge, but it also helped me to steer my life in the direction which was more fitting for myself.
Tell me more about your traveling in the dangerous season in Ukraine.
Just to make sure, before I went there, I called a few people I knew who live in Ukraine. They're Ukrainian, and I asked them, is it okay to visit? Because I wanted to make sure, and they said, yeah, you can visit. There's no problem. And of course, you cannot fly there because the airspace is closed. I entered overland from Moldova by bus, and I arrived in Odessa. And when I arrived, at first I it completely didn't feel like a country at war, because it was just like people were sitting, having a beer outside, they were laughing. I saw families walking in the streets, like shops were open, restaurants, bars, everything was open. Trams, public transportation was running. So I was like, wait a minute, but this is supposed to be a country at war. So, and then the next day, I had this app on my phone which warned you against air raids. So in the morning, I woke up and I saw that there had been air raids on Odessa during the night. It didn't even wake me up. I found out that, unfortunately, one rocket hit a factory and someone was killed. Then I realized that, okay, it feels like this is a normal city, but there is a war going on. But of course now the air defense system is quite good. So normally most rockets which are fired at Ukraine are intercepted. Unfortunately, just last night there was this really big attack in Kramatorsk where a lot of people died. So of course, I mean, if you're really unlucky, then this can happen. But anyway, then I continued from Odessa to Kharkiv, from Kharkiv to Kiev, from Kiev to Lviv, and then I exited through to Poland. It was a very emotional and intense week. I spent 1 week in Ukraine, and I saw a lot of destruction, especially in Kharkiv. Because it's pretty close to the border of Russia, so there was one neighborhood where like every building is destroyed, and you can see there has been fires and everything. So that was really pretty horrible to see. And then, but at the same time, I also saw that the people are basically continuing their life as far as possible, as good as possible, and they are absolutely resilient. So they are very strong and proud, and you can see flags everywhere, you can see slogans everywhere, and I also saw a lot of reconstruction already going on. Like, for instance, I went to Bucha. Maybe you remember there was at the beginning of the war a lot of human rights abuses, and like hundreds of people were killed and tortured by the Russians. That was one of the many bad episodes in the war. But surprisingly, at least parts of the city have already been completely rebuilt. I was in streets which were almost completely destroyed a year ago, and right now, like, the street is completely new, the houses are new, people are living there, and it looks like, well, the war is still going on and you're already rebuilding your country. So for me, it showed like how strong their mentality is to just keep on going and to believe in a better future for themselves. I mean, this I really admired.
What was the app that you used for air attack?
I thought it's called Air Alarm Ukraine. Air Alarm Ukraine, yeah. Okay. And it's very accurate. So like in Kharkiv, I was walking in on one of the biggest squares of Europe. It's called Freedom Square, and actually they had a really big attack at the beginning of the war. So one of the government buildings was completely destroyed by a rocket. A lot of people were killed. So I was walking on the square, and then at the same time, both my app gave me a warning, but also in the streets I heard these alarms going off. And of course, then you're supposed to go to shelter. And I was looking at the whole subway in Kharkiv is free to use, so you can take the subway for free because it's basically one big underground shelter system. So I was looking around and I noticed that no one was going to the shelter. So, and I thought, well, if no one goes to the shelter, why would I go to the shelter? Because I always try to do what local people. I mean, people just continue. And afterwards, I asked them like, well, but there was an air alarm going off. And they said, well, yeah, but at the beginning of the war, we always went to the shelter, but you cannot live in a shelter for the rest of your life. So partly because, I suppose, because the air defense is much better now, but people were maybe just tired. The consequence, probably, I don't know exactly what happened last night in Kramatorsk, but maybe that's why if a missile really hits a residential area or a restaurant like last night, and I'm sure there must have been an air alarm. Yeah, well, this is your risk, of course. I mean, it can go wrong.
I love the way you expressed the way to travel. So adventure begins where the familiar ends. You might have said this one as a traveler, but this line is so insightful neuroscientifically and psychologically. For example, our human brain, as you may know it already, our brain thinks that what is familiar to us is safer than the thing that we don't know yet. So being a traveler is challenging yourself in a way, which means prepare ourselves to a new world which means we are ready to make a new kind of connection in our neurons. So, any words?
This is really, I'm really happy you bring this up because this is the essence of my book. I visited my last country in 2017 and I started writing straight away. For some weird reason, I never planned to write a book when I was still traveling. I'm still traveling now, but when I was still traveling and still had to reach my last country, I never considered writing a book. But only shortly after I visited my last country, I realized like I have lived so many adventures. I want to share them with the world. So I started writing straight away. And then after a few months, I stopped writing and I took a step back and I thought maybe I should first do some thinking before starting just to write, because it's easy to write. But so then actually I took a few years to think about the structure of the book and how to write it. And well, you will see there's different stories of completely different countries. So I was like, how am I going to make sure that this will be like a unity, like there's a link between all those stories, and this, what you're saying now, is exactly the essence of my book. So I want to show people that the unknown actually is something that you should be looking forward to instead of being afraid of. That's as short as I can say it.
Briefly, how has travel changed you?
Changed me in the way that I have a very open view to the world, and I judge people based on their behavior and what they say, not on their color or background or whatever. I value people for who they are and not for who they belong to. What else has changed? Well, so I visited every country in the world, but of course I wasn't born with this idea. So this is something that grows. So also travel grew. So I used to travel. I also used to travel maybe once or twice a year, and then my curiosity was too strong. So I started traveling 3 times a year, 4 times a year, and now I don't even know how often I travel. But so now basically travel has become my way of life. So the other way it changed me is that I don't really have this feeling of being home. I mean, I'm home maybe for a few days, but never. So like now I came home on Sunday, like 3 days ago, and I'm leaving tonight. So I've been home 2 days, 3 nights, and I'm gone again. And then next week I'll come back. I'm gone for a week, and then I'll be home maybe for 2 days, and I'm leaving again. So it's so that's a bit. I mean, and then the challenge is, of course, to keep my friends at home and to see my family and to celebrate their birthdays. And whenever I see them, I realize that they lead a more, let's say, regular life, and for them, home has a completely different meaning. For me, home is a base, and I have a nice house. I really like it. I like being home, but I'm never until COVID happened. I had never been home for more than a few days in a row.
Okay, tell me, who are the most memorable person in your travel?
Good question, but there are so many. Yeah, I will never be able to calculate, but lately I was thinking, like, how many people did I meet? And it must be many thousands from basically really from all countries and all walks of life and all backgrounds and all colors and all beliefs and everything. So one of the persons that really, I met him, when was that? Something like 10 years ago. I was traveling in the South Pacific in Kiribati, and I was on a remote atoll, and I walked like 25 kilometers from south to north. And when I reached the northern part of the atoll, I came to a beach, and so a guy came out of his hut, and we started to talk, and then he asked me, where are you from? Which of course it's almost always the first question. So he asked, where are you from? And I said, well, from Netherlands. And he looked at me like, I have no idea where that is. And then I tried to help him, like, well, we are famous for windmills, for cheese, for football, for flowers, but no. So then I said, maybe you've heard about Germany or France or United Kingdom, because they're bigger countries. And then he looked, I know that, and I've heard of them. And then he asked me, like, how far is it to go by boat from your place to Germany? And I said, well, there is no boat. It's you just you take a train or a car or a bicycle or you walk, but you just cross the border. And he looked at me like, that's weird. And then he asked me about France, and I said, well, there is no boat to France. I mean, between Netherlands and France, there's even Belgium. There's another country. And so I decided not to talk about Belgium, but I said, yeah, you just take a train or you go by car, you go to France. And then and he didn't understand that. And then I realized at a certain moment, like, this guy is from the South Pacific, and for him, your identity is decided by your island. And also the bigger countries in the region, like Philippines or Indonesia or Australia or New Zealand, they're all island nations. So for him, an island is a country, or an island is an identity or a community. And then I told him, like, I can travel from my home all the way to China, and I will never take a boat, and I will cross like at least 6 or 7 borders. And he was like, that's the weirdest thing I ever heard. But then I started to think about it, and then I realized, in a way, he's right. Why would we even have a border on land? I mean, an island is like a geographical entity, and of course you can see this is an island, that's another island, so that's 2 different islands and maybe 2 different people. But why is the border between Netherlands and Germany here and not there? And why is there a border in the first place? Because so that made me rethink. And it was funny in a way for me, because I was at that time I still had like many countries to visit before reaching my goal. So I was really keen on traveling to countries I'd never been to before. And so this guy was completely turning everything upside down for me, because he was making me rethink, like, well, what are those borders anyway? I mean, it's just an invention. It's what we talked about before. It's a human higher level decision. Okay, we have all these countries, they're independent, and we're even willing to fight wars about them and to kill people for defending our country, attacking another country. And so again, it made me realize, like, why? And of course, I mean, I know why. We have different backgrounds, different cultures, different languages, different histories and everything. But this has been shaped by history. But if you go back a few steps before that, there were no borders. And so for me, that was a very unexpected encounter with someone who managed to make me rethink a lot of things that I always took for granted. Like, well, of course, I mean, we have a border, and he really sincerely, he didn't understand that. I'm looking forward to meeting my first Korean independent travelers.
Oh, okay.
You got me thinking, like, I meet a lot of people from like many different countries, but now that I think of it, Koreans, that's very rare to meet Koreans on the road.
I'm going to include this in the video, so there might be somebody who's interested in that. So what is your verdict on that travel can help us to become a better human beings?
If you travel in a way that you try to be as open as possible, and you try to see people for what they really are, then I believe that you become a better person, and that you don't judge people too much, and you see people as fellow human beings instead of enemies or people who are out there to do something bad to you. And of course, those people exist, unfortunately, but again, they're a small minority. So I think this is one of the ways in which you could be a better human being.